If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today I'm joined by Gary McCoy, a globally respected performance technologist, sports scientist, and innovator who helped pioneer wearable technology in elite athletics. In this episode, we dive into the history of wearables, how to filter meaningful metrics from noise, and the real-world impact of data on behavior and recovery. If you've ever wondered whether your wearable is helping or hurting your health, this conversation's for you. Let's get started. Gary McCoy, my good friend, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, mate. Now your audience is going to be hearing accents here today. So this is the all Commonwealth version of the Vitality Collective, right? That's what I'm looking forward to.
And don't worry, we will have subtitles.
We might need them, We might need them.
So Gary, you and I met when I was with the Brooklyn Nets. So that would have been 2012, 2013.
Well, it might have been 2013, I think it was. Yeah. You were actually one of the first practitioners to request a demo of the company's hardware that I was working with in the NBA. We had a couple of teams kind of asking questions, but you had more questions than everybody. I'm like, hey, I'm coming up to Brooklyn.
Yeah. I do tend to have a lot of questions. I think that's why I'm fitting in quite well as a podcast host.
I love it.
So for context, everybody, that what we're talking about here, Gary was working for a company called Catapult Sports. And this was one of the first wearable technology companies to break into pro sport. And we were really trying to start gathering data because it's actually quite amazing that even in 2012-13, we basically had no data on our athletes. So we're flying blind with these $100 million athletes, and we're just going through our processes. And you were building this company and really bringing this over to the US because it had been going in Australia. And then we had to introduce it into pro sport. And it was amazing because we didn't know what basketball looked like from a data standpoint. Gary, tell us a bit about what Catapult Sport brought to the table for professional sports and for practitioners like myself.
So super interesting. The foundation of Catapult Sports, Australian company that started in Melbourne, Australia, my hometown. And I was actually had already relocated to the US and was working in professional baseball when I got the outreach from Catapult saying, hey, your name keeps coming up to us. We need somebody to work with us to interpret this data and try to launch us into professional sports markets in the Northern Hemisphere. And they said, we really want to start in the United States. So Catapult was born out of an initiative that came from what's known as the Australian Institute of Sport. They had a grant. They put together a couple of engineers applied for this grant because at the AIS, some of the problems they had, they would take athletes into a lab, they'd do all this testing, they'd put them out on the field, the pitch, whatever sport that they were playing, and they were looking for data transfer. Like, did this counter movement jump, something that is done traditionally in sport, did that show me asymmetries or imbalances in that athlete? And can I see those now out when they're on the court playing basketball? And there was no kind of correlation. There was a massive gap between testing in a lab and what was on the field. So give birth to Catapult Sports. That started back in I think it was 2005 or 6 is when Catapult really first started. And it was crash tested in the Australian Football League, which if any of your listeners have ever watched Australian rules football, it's kind of chaos in a controlled space, right? So cut its teeth there, was very successful at reducing injury, which is something you
Right.
and I both lean into as
Right.
practitioners. Reduce injury, improve performance in that order if we can, or preventable injury. We want to reduce.
Right.
We can't stop stupid things like people running into one another. But it
Yeah.
was that preventable injury side that in the Australian Football League, Catapult were making great strides with
Hmm.
reducing things like hamstring injuries on these athletes because they were kind of monitoring this thing we've termed load. How much
Right.
load is being applied to the muscles and the skeletal system in the human body. So through a system that linked up to GPS, was a GPS uplink,
Right.
a GPS unit in a little wearable vest that sat right at T1 on the spine, so right at the bottom
Hmm.
of your neck is where this sat. So we could be getting uplinked to GPS so we could look at the distances an athlete run and try to determine how fatigued are they, how tired are they from this
Right.
practice session. And then we'd look at things like how much movement left versus how much movement right. We had all this data, but the reason Catapult couldn't get this company started in the US is they had nothing, they didn't really understand sport. They were
Right.
technologists. And
Right.
they needed to put some context around the data that was coming in. So,
Hmm.
and that's when I started, I thought, yeah, it's the NFL was our first thing to knock over because on the business side, there's 90 monitors in practice versus,
Right.
4 for Stanford men's tennis team, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll start in the NFL, get that going. And then we moved into the NBA, which is where we met. And
Right.
Catapult continue to be incredibly successful. They're a great story on Australian
Yeah.
sport technology being distributed around the world. They're kind of the de facto tech system
Yeah.
in most sports, and to the tune of about 3,200 teams around the
Right.
world using their system right now.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. And Gary, I think what this showed us, this was the
Mm,
start of the proliferation of wearable technology coming in to monitor athletes.
mm,
We've been through our GPS monitoring, and they
mm.
they evolved into accelerometry for the indoor sports.
Yeah,
And then we started getting into sleep monitors, and there's basically monitors for just about every physiological function for the athlete now.
yeah,
And this, the pro sport market really is sort of the marketing, the brand building for a lot of these companies. And what we're going to talk
absolutely.
about today is how those companies are now seeing the opportunity to move into the consumer market.
Yeah,
And I think we're seeing this similar proliferation of monitors that are tracking everything we can possibly track.
yeah,
And we're getting inundated with data. And I don't see the correlation with more data and health improvements.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in
It's
some cases, the converse,
yes,
right? And you and I talked about that with some of
yeah,
the overwhelm of data and you've got
yeah,
placebo and all these other factors. But
yeah,
I think that's sort of what we're going to touch on today is what are all these wearables? What do they mean? What's the
yeah.
data? What's meaningful? And
Right.
how should we make a decision on what wearable we're gonna wear?
Well, exactly. And there's a financial cost to these wearables as well for
Right.
consumers too, right? So, I mean, if you've got if you're a professional athlete and you've got, people will give you things for free when you can afford
Yeah.
10x of whatever they're offering, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting space, but there's a lot of decisions that need to be made around wearables for a consumer because at the end of the day, it's I think what is your goal? What are you trying
Hmm.
to achieve? There's so much now research that's gone into why people join a gym. And
Right.
while it used to be for a very long time in this market, it was driven by aesthetics. I just want to look
Hmm.
good naked, right? That's what I want to do. So I'm
Right.
going to go to the gym so that I can, I feel better about myself and I
Yeah.
look really good. So it was driven by aesthetics. But over the course of the last, say, 15 years, there's been this slight shift towards more performance. So now the
Right.
data is saying about 40% of health club members are in with some kind of goal, whether that's to run a
Right.
5K, whether that's I want to look good aesthetically for a wedding. There's still some of those aesthetic components,
Hmm.
but these are goal driven, and those goals are time based goals. So
Right.
those are the first two things I think anybody considering a wearable should ask themselves this question. What is my goal? Why do I want something to
Hmm.
help with me physically, and then
Yeah.
two, what is the timeline I'm going to use this for? And I think the third part of that equation, as we just touched on, is don't believe everything the wearable tells you, and we can dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, we will certainly get to that because I do
Yeah.
think that that's such a critical piece.
Mm,
I love that as a framework to start from, Gary,
sure.
because the goal really is gonna dictate what information we need to receive,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we have to then go out and find the wearable that gives us those data points,
Right.
and then so it's okay. What are the selection of wearables that we can have that give us this data?
Mm,
And then what is the most accurate data amongst those that we can receive? Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is change our behavior, right?
yes.
We're trying to
Absolutely.
get
Yeah.
information to improve our behavior set, improve our lifestyle towards this goal that we're actually pursuing here.
Exactly. And that's one of the challenges. And I think, like, we could go back and look at the history of wearables. I remember when we were introducing Catapult at the same time, Fatigue Science was another company
Hmm.
that was coming
That's right.
into the marketplace. And I know you've had experience with this. So this device, I don't even know if they're still around. I think they've got a lot of military contracts, so they're
I think
probably
so.
still working in the military, but
Yeah.
this was a little device that was worn around the wrist, was functionally just an accelerometer. So for listeners, what an accelerometer is, we have there's a few different versions of them, but most devices use what's called a triaxial accelerometer. So
Right.
it can know whether there's movement forward, there's movement up or down, or there's movement
Right.
laterally. It can pick that information up. So if you wear that overnight while you're sleeping, there's this science called actigraphy, which
Right.
measures basic movement in the body. And so what fatigue science tried to do was use motion at the wrist to infer how well you slept that night
Right.
and how well recovered you were. But the biggest problem we had, and I saw this with the Dallas Mavericks, and actually at the time we were working with the Mavericks. Mark Cuban was also an investor in Catapult Sports.
Right.
After, like, I think Catapult probably owe you a commission because it was what I learned from you and took down to the
Yeah.
Mavericks, right? Like what we were looking at
I'll
was
make
all
that
in.
call.
Make that call right away. So it was all very, very kind of serendipitous when I got there, and Cuban's over my shoulder looking at this data. He's like, "Man, tell me more about this company. I think I might want to invest in something here. You've got
Right.
something." And so that was really the beginning of the boom, the big explosion of Catapult
Yeah.
in the Northern Hemisphere. But fatigue science were there, and they had this little readout that would say
Yeah.
something, or give you a percentage, I think is what it would give you, or a score out of 100,
Yeah, it
right?
was a readiness score out of 100 because we used
Yeah,
them at the Nets. Yeah,
that's right.
and
Yeah,
real time. You could
in
press that
real
button
time.
and it
So
would tell
yeah,
you what your energy was.
yep. And so,
Yeah.
like, if I woke up and I'm like, wow, I feel fantastic today, I look down at an inaccurate wearable. Now I don't know
Yeah.
error amounts of fatigue science, but we could find that out.
Yeah.
I look down at the number and go, I feel great today, but I'm only 57%. So
Yeah.
then you've got this, almost this placebo effect of having this
Yeah.
information. You go, I'm not as good as I feel, and that would alter the
Yeah.
performance track. So one of the first things we did at the Dallas Mavericks when I was talking to was Casey Smith, I think the head athletic
Yeah.
trainer there.
Yeah.
Good old Casey. I said, mate, I said, do you have the option to turn off the score? Just have it
Yeah.
internally.
Yeah.
Obviously, give it to the players if they want it because it really is their information. And that's at the pro level. I think players should all have their own information.
Yeah.
But when players were looking at this, it could negatively impact their
Yeah.
performance that day. So one of the things we've learned, and you and I talk about this a lot, is the importance of cognitive and emotional state for a
Yeah.
professional athlete. So
Yeah.
if all of a sudden something's told me I'm not as good as I could be today,
Yeah.
oh, then my physical expression, how
Yeah.
high I can jump, how fast I can run, is all going to be compromised because of that.
Right.
It's mind and emotions over the
Right.
physical system first and foremost.
Yeah. Well, Gary, that's amazing you bring that up because that I've got a couple of stories from fatigue
Mm.
science in particular.
Yeah.
So for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a sleep company,
Yep.
right? And so they would monitor sleep. We would look at sleep duration, sleep quality, but they had an algorithm that they had used to project out from your sleep what your energy levels were. And so we would use this, and they would say you could use it to sort of project out your travel schedule. And okay, if you travel here, what's your energy levels going to be for your next
Right.
game? And so you hear this and you're just like, oh my God, this is life changing,
Thank you.
but
Yes.
so wildly inaccurate. So
Yeah.
we had that exact scenario. The
Yeah.
NBA schedule is the NBA schedule. If you're on a
Mm.
back to back, you probably
Yep.
don't feel great
Oh,
second night.
yeah, exactly.
And one of our guys did exactly what you were looking at. He's been in the league. He knows how he feels on that second night, and he plays great.
Yep.
But now I'm telling him he should be at a 90 on his watch, and he's at a 60. And he's like, Jeremy, I got to stop wearing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that it's exactly a point. I was telling him he was feeling bad,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just feeling how he feels. He was fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so I
Exactly.
think that's a really important piece of this data equation. He couldn't see that and think, oh, I wonder what I could change in the future. I
Yeah.
actually feel pretty good.
Yep. Yeah.
One other
Exactly.
guy that
Yeah.
had it, I noticed that his scores were dropping. I went
Mm.
over and had a conversation, and he said, yeah, I have been sleeping really poorly. They just started construction across the street from my apartment. And so we were able to move him to a hotel, improve his
Yeah.
scores, and his performance carried on.
Beautiful.
So, sort of the two ways of looking at data there, either
Mm.
in the moment, oh God, I'm not going to perform, or, oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
Next time, we won't get the guys up for shoot around. We'll let them sleep a little longer.
Right. Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
how you interpret and how you act on the data is very important.
It's absolutely critical, and you hit on a number of parts of that equation there. I think that for the most part, one wearable we're waiting for, the one wearable that gives us everything we want, right? Gives us all the information we need,
Yeah.
and that is one of the innate problems. Now, most wearables, like we talked about the GPS uplink, but really, if we go all the way back to, I think the original wearable was probably a polar heart rate strap. There might have
Right.
been
Exactly.
something before our time, right? But
Yeah.
those polar heart rate straps, and they fell out of vogue because guess what? You can't wear one in padded sports, and in the
Yeah.
NFL, you can't wear
Yeah.
this strap around your chest. So, one of the biggest problems I think we have is, and it's a lot of how we interpret data, but the biggest
Hmm.
thing is it's this human body, this chaos theory that we walk around in.
Yeah.
It's interdependent and interrelated physical systems that are
Right.
producing your motion, or
Right.
whatever you call is what you're moving towards. And so those must exist in some sense of individual hierarchy. And what do
Yeah.
I want to measure? Am I going to measure stress on my body, or am I going to measure my body's response to that stress?
Right.
Those together would be phenomenal. But then what's my emotional and cognitive state presentation that day?
Yeah.
We need something for that as well. It's almost like we need to understand that, as your listeners know, as we both know intuitively, that there are days you wake up and you just want to pull the covers back over your head and say,
Yeah.
I am done. In the NBA, playing in Denver, right, at altitude,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
man, that would wipe you out the next day as well. So there's all these environmental factors that come into play during the course of whether it's a season, whether it's just day-to-day living.
Yeah.
If you're a mom who's got 3 or 4 kids that you're running around, you're trying to stay healthy to maintain their lifestyle. I mean, the questions that must be asked, I think, before you select a wearable is,
Yeah.
what is my goal? What measurements, and we can easily figure that out, what measurements will apply to that goal, and then how am I going to manage the data forward? How
Yeah.
am I'm going to ask my question, I'm going to look myself in the mirror in the morning and say, how do I feel? Boy, I feel really
Right.
good today. This morning I woke up and my Aura ring, which is about the only wearable that I've consistently had for a number of years
Yeah.
now, because it's one of the more accurate products that are
Hmm.
out there. Um, it had told me I had a pretty crappy night's sleep, but I was feeling pretty
Right.
good, so I disregard it. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're off. Yeah, maybe the sensors moved a little bit, or maybe there's too much
Hmm.
motion. Maybe I didn't connect in. There's all those failure point opportunities with wearables that
Yeah.
they use what you and I have talked about. Interpolation is the term that
Right.
these tech companies will say. Well, yeah, we've got, like, if this is the entirety of sleep, yeah, we missed about 10 of those moments, but we'll
Yeah.
just fill in the gaps with
Yeah.
what we have. We'll just average
Exactly.
everything out, fill in the gaps.
Exactly.
Well, that may be
Yeah.
fine if you've got to chase around the kids tomorrow, but if we're in the playoffs and we have your hamstring injured soccer player at New York City
Yeah.
Football Club and he's
Right.
got to
Right.
be
Right.
ready in a week, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is that story, and you've got to tell your listeners that on one podcast. I won't get into it now,
Yeah.
but that's phenomenal. And these are some of the discussions around wearables. It's like
Yeah.
a wearable for who and why, and then am I going to get the most out of it?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about sleep monitors because you
Hmm.
mentioned actigraphy. And
Yes.
I think that there is a misunderstanding of how a lot of this data is generated.
Hmm.
When you wear a sleep monitor, I get asked all the time, so how does it do it? Is it heart rate? Is it
Yeah.
HRV? Like, how are they actually measuring sleep? But as you said, it's literally how you're moving your body
Yeah.
during sleep.
Hmm.
And they are making assumptions that if you move like this, you're in deep sleep. If
Yes.
you move like this, you're in REM sleep. And so what we know about the sleep staging is that it's marketing.
Yes.
It's
100%.
at best, the best wearable you can find for sleep is 70% accurate for sleep staging.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just
And
remarkable.
yeah, so if one of the markers that we lean into, say deep sleep, that deep restorative sleep, those
Hmm.
slow wave sleep cycles, that's deep sleep. If we started looking at those and the amount of those, it's like first and foremost, I think we and it comes from, I think, the way we're taught in basic education, that one
Hmm.
plus one equals two, that everything is pretty linear. And that's
Right.
one of the biggest problems, I think, and you and I have talked about this even from a longevity standpoint, quality of time versus quantity of time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Qualitative approach to this data
Right.
set. So a good quality sleep for me could be 4 hours,
Yeah.
could be 9. It depends on the amount of a recovery that my body functionally needs that night,
Right.
and also depends on so many other factors like hydration, nutrition, right? What have I
Hmm.
done in those areas? Am I supplementing for sleep? Am I, there's like having traveled, like you and I have probably more miles than most of your listeners, right? I'm all over the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
I sometimes take sleep meds with me to reconstitute my time zones, when I'm
Exactly.
working
Yeah.
overseas. But the wearables, yeah, they guess at sleep staging. And
Right.
the funny part of it too is like there was a company I worked for that was big in recovery and sleep. Readers could go on. I was critically inaccurate product, so I was only there for about 12 months. But during that period in time, I was able to look at a lot of stuff relative to sleep, a lot of stuff relative to recovery, and
Hmm.
in that process, the sleep part of the equation was always one of the harder ones to
Yeah.
make make decisions from. Like I would rather take, hey Jeremy, how are you feeling today, than
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
74% off your wearable.
Yeah. I think that's if we start from, okay, my goal, I
Mm,
want to monitor my sleep. I want to improve my sleep.
yes.
I think understanding that, because, I have clients all the time. They are so focused on their data, right? They get so freaked out if their
Yeah.
data is off.
Yep.
And I think this is a really important place to start from. So let's just start from the basis of
Mm.
actigraphy is how all of your commercial sleep monitors measure sleep.
Correct. The
So
one,
don't worry about
the
the
one
sleep
addition,
staging.
yeah, the one additional, like, there's another device I have for sleep right now, which I absolutely love, and it's 8 Sleep.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Dr. Ben Peterson, who was formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, where he brought that product in, he's now
Hmm.
over at the Atlanta Hawks. Ben was the one that said to me, look, he goes, you might want to have a look at this product. So naturally, I buy it and install it right away. What I like about that, it is using actigraphy as well. There's no question,
Hmm.
but it's whole body. My whole body
Right,
is kind of measured in motion, like, so
right.
it's a top that sits over the mattress. The
Yeah,
other beauty of this, which I think they're onto something here, but given errors in actigraphy, I don't know the accuracy of this, but the bed will heat up and cool down relative to the
interesting.
stage of cycle that you're in.
Yeah.
And so here's what I know. When Ben Peterson introduced 8 Sleep, with the San Francisco 49ers in their summer training period, OTAs is what they're termed. They have 90 athletes coming in. They all stayed at dorms there in Palo Alto. Ben ordered 90 of these 8 sleep systems at about $2.5 grand a pop, right? So that's the
Yeah.
kind of money that's being spent here. Ordered 90 of them. When training camp was over and he went to check out, there was 5 left there. The players grabbed them and they took them with them, right? That
Yeah.
number may be off, or maybe more than 5, but
Yeah.
nearly all the players wanted to take that system with them. So that told me a
Right.
little bit about how
Yeah.
they felt about their recovery. And there are one of the things that I know is placebo effects are effects.
Yes, they are.
Right?
Yes,
So
they are.
we could certainly jump
Right.
down that
Otherwise,
channel
it
as
wouldn't
well.
have a name.
Exactly.
So we know that sleep staging then, let's not worry about if we say it says we have 5 minutes of deep sleep,
Mm.
right? We're not going to pay too much attention to that, but it may be sensitive for you if you use that over many weeks.
Mm.
That might be sensitive to change for you.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry that it's only 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Watch it change, right? Because that'll
Yeah.
probably over and be accurate for you.
It's
And
kind of
then
like,
yeah,
I was going to say, mate, it's kind of like going to the doctor and getting a blood pressure reading. Oh, your
yeah,
blood pressure's high. Well, yeah, because I'm in pain, because I just watched, a scary movie. There's so
yeah,
many factors that could affect blood pressure. One reading doesn't always give
yeah,
us the picture. It's this
yeah,
temporal view over time where if the data is repeatable and reliable, even if it is a little bit inaccurate, if it's repeatable and reliable, we'll get some good data over time. And
yeah,
we can
exactly.
say, hey, Jeremy sleepers, maybe it's, he's right around 6 hours right now. We know that he could get a little bit more. He's got more time, but maybe you only
Yeah,
need 6 hours. We don't know. It's
yeah,
like, don't let the data make that decision. Data
yeah,
informs, it doesn't decide. We still hold the cards on the decision.
exactly. And so, where is actigraphy accurate? Where is it doing a good job for us? Like what are the data points that we should pay
Wow.
attention to here?
It's a great question because, look, I think the gold standard for monitoring sleep has been these sleep labs, right? And
Yeah,
you're all into a sleep lab, and I've done a few, and I've sat with a wearable device in there as well to
yeah,
compare it against these sleep labs. This, you get into a sleep lab, and it's hilarious. The technicians, hey, just relax and go to sleep. Well, you got stuff buzzing around you. You've got a halo on your head. You've got all these devices, basically a 12 lead EKG and
yeah,
everything. And it's like you're connected to everything. If you want it to roll over, you're in trouble. So
yeah,
I even think the gold standard of what we look at is so difficult to get data from. So
yeah.
even the correlation with actigraphy could be compromised. Even if
Right.
actigraphy was accurate, it could be compromised because we're modeling it off these
Yeah,
sleep labs, which is unnatural sleep. It's not natural sleep.
yeah, yeah. Having somebody sitting by your bed watching you is not exactly comfortable.
Yeah, I have a cat that does that,
Yeah,
and that freaks me out.
right. And so I think what we should be looking for then, is duration and quality of sleep in terms
Mm,
of it does a decent job of were you awake or were you asleep,
mm.
right? It does a pretty
Yep.
good job of that. So you
Yeah,
can
it
get
does.
sleep duration pretty well, right? And
Yes.
then you can get did you wake up during the night?
Yes.
And I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
you can understand whether you got fractured sleep and how much sleep in total you got.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. So that's to your point. That's where actigraphy will work for us. Now, a lot of these sleep monitors, well, let's talk a little bit about heart rate variability because there's our next
Yeah,
marker, right? Because this
yeah,
big
excellent.
guy,
Yeah.
it's really been in vogue. I want to say from 2015, we started to
Yeah.
hear more studies about heart
Hmm.
rate variability and what that is. And there was this rush, I think, in the literature to assign heart rate variability scores to recovery of the
Right,
individual. And
right.
to that end, I don't think enough research has been done in the
Hmm.
area itself. And you and I have had some great discussions around this.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't know. Jury's out for me on whether that's
yeah,
going to be a long-term reliable
yeah.
marker for that aspect of monitoring sleep.
Well, okay then, Gary. So break down for us what exactly is heart rate variability because we
Sure.
hear it a lot, and
Yeah.
and I don't know that people really understand it as a concept.
Yeah, so the best way to think about this is the time between your heartbeats. So the
Yeah,
way to look at it, like, we all see those, like we've all gone to a doctor, maybe had, cardiac view, or you've just seen them,
yeah,
this is what we
yeah.
call the T wave, right?
Right,
Populating through there. Those big peak points on that T wave, what we're looking
right,
at, these are all millisecond timestamps, is what they
right,
are. So we're looking at that millisecond timestamp between those two big beats. And that could be, maybe it's 5 seconds. Then over time, maybe it's 8 seconds. That maybe it's increasing over time. And there was this, again, rush, I think, to correlate higher scores with
hmm,
greater recovery. But as you and I know, there's so many factors that can affect heart rate
yeah,
variability, just like we talked about, getting up and down out of bed during the course of the evening or
right,
during the day. If we were measuring HRV during the course of a day,
yeah,
I might have to run to catch the bus or run to catch the train
right,
or make that motion. And I'm just walking on, boom. And then so my heart rate is like this. Then it
yeah,
comes down again. Now, that in a view of, say, that last hour would be, oh, your heart rate variability is really high, so I'm going to give
really
you this
high.
score. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me relative to using it in its totality. Like, I think the way we need to look at it, and potentially this is something we could do with one of the manufacturers, is maybe we remove motion from HRV and we just collect HRV. Like one of the wearable devices, I won't mention the name of the company, but they try to collect heart rate variability in the last 5 minutes of slow wave sleep. Well, the
cool.
problem with that is sleep cycles, like we talked about again,
We
they're
don't know when
guessing.
you're in your last.
They're absolutely guessing where that
Yeah,
last 5 minutes of slow wave sleep is. So
yeah,
I use the analogy with some teams that have contacted me about that
hmm,
product specifically. I said, guys, look, this is like trying to thread a needle across a room. I said, good
yeah,
luck with that, right? I mean,
yeah,
to hit that 5 minutes when you don't even know if the actigraphy is operating for
yeah,
these sleep cycles. I
yeah,
mean, we're still guessing. I think in terms of where we sit with wearables, any of your listeners that are over, probably 45 years old now, probably know that our cell phones used to be the size of a brick that we would carry around, and
yeah,
they'd lose signal all the time, and they'd cost you a fortune. That's where we are today with wearables.
yeah. And I think again the understanding that that data might not be gold standard. So
Correct.
many of these that give you an
Yeah.
HRV score, they're not even continuously measured, as you alluded to. This one wearable will be
Yeah.
that last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Some of them are done periodically, right? So
Yes.
they'll do say 5 minutes or 10 minutes per hour, maybe even 1 minute per hour,
Yeah.
and that
They
that will
average it
be
out. Yeah.
exactly. And so
RMSSD or something is the
yeah, exactly right.
terminology. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think leaning into a device that has continuous monitoring,
Mm.
that's got to be like a critical aspect of this.
Yeah.
One of our partners that we use with our clients is Somnology,
Yes.
and they're a continuous monitor.
Great company.
And
Yeah.
so I think making sure that as we're making our decisions, we understand how the company is gathering the data
Hmm.
is really important before you start getting really worried about your health based on what this thing's telling you.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly. Yeah.
a good
And
point.
that's what's super interesting in, like, my career trajectory. As you're well aware, in the last couple of years, took a left turn when I realized, I'd done a fair bit in the wearable sector in professional sport. I got recruited to an artificial intelligence company that was trying
Mhm.
to use that data now to make predictions for athletes in
Right,
professional
right.
sports,
Yeah,
right? The holy grail of artificial intelligence in
makes sense.
sport
Yeah.
is to predict whether, what the outputs are going to look like for that athlete that next day. One of the problems that AI has, and I learned this really quickly, with a company I was working with, called Zone 7, that have
Yeah.
been, I think, acquired by Spexa. Zone 7 were a brilliant company ahead of their time working in soccer in La Liga. They tried to bring this kind of washed out data from soccer and try to apply
Mhm.
it into US sports. And I often make the
Yeah.
joke that US sports are a lot like Australian animals, right? Like, and the NFL is the duck-billed platypus of all sports, right?
Yeah.
It's kind
Yeah.
of all these parts kind of put together. Um, But when we were in there looking at it, we realized that the data coming off the wearables was so inaccurate, it
Yeah.
was not reliable, it was not even repeatable, that
Right.
we couldn't, AI can't do its job yet on the
Hmm.
player health and wellness factor because the data's not strong enough yet. So we can't put bad garbage data into AI.
Yeah.
It's going to give us garbage data back out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that is even true of resting heart rate.
Right.
When we're delivering
Yeah.
resting heart rates that are taken
Mm.
at night, again, most of the companies, it's a periodic measurement. And
Yep.
so we're assuming this is our lowest heart rate of the night.
Mm.
And then I think if we take that one snapshot, okay, let's say your resting heart rate was this one moment in
Mm.
time,
Mm.
it can really give us a bit of a false sense of what that actual measure is, right? I think looking at an average of the night, if you're going to do that, it will give you a much more repeatable measure
Yeah.
of what your true resting heart rate might actually be.
I would agree 100%, and I think I can acquire that data from like an 8 sleep, or
Yeah,
I would take that because I get into bed, it's got me for the night, it's got all my motions, got everything. It's not measuring my heart rate when I'm
yeah,
getting up or down, right? So it's got a fair
yeah,
bit of good data set there. So yeah, I agree. We've got to have this view of it, and are we even looking at the right data for your
right,
goals and what you want to achieve?
right. So Gary, let's move on, and we look at sleep. Number one thing to take away from sleep: don't
Mm.
obsess too much about your data.
Exactly.
Wake up and understand how you feel. Use the data as a reference. Now
Exactly.
let's move on to heart rate.
Mm.
Right, as people are wearing these monitors now, like I wear this, I track my data now. If I track on my watch, this gets worse the more I exercise. So as my heart rate goes higher,
Yep. Yep.
like this will tell me my heart rate's 50 and I'm about to pass out on a hike. Right? If I'm lifting weights, it's basically worthless. It's a random number
Yep.
generator.
Yes.
And this is a top model of one of the top companies that does this.
Yeah.
How is this measuring my heart rate?
Well, let's talk about the body's geography
Yeah,
and where you're wearing that device right now.
right.
What I learned over time working in this sector is that the wrist, phenomenal place to look at data,
Yeah.
horrible place to collect it from, right? So
Oh, right, right.
how they're collecting data is they'll like Apple Watch, Whoop, trying to think, BioStrap, an emerging company that's in the market right now. They use what a science called photoplethysmography. Folks
Okay,
listening to this, don't
that's a
try to
mouthful.
say that word. That is a mouthful, right? I think it's often referred to as PPG in the
Right.
literature and for this. But what it is, it's like a little sonar, and it's looking for. Imagine you and I are in Los Angeles, and we're in a helicopter, and
Hmm.
we're trying to follow OJ up the 405 freeway in his Bronco,
Yeah.
right? And he passes under, all these different layered freeways in Los Angeles. We're going to lose him. We can't find that white Bronco through this mix
Hmm.
of freeways. That's what's going on at the wrist.
Right.
We shift to the finger where we've got arterial blood flow. Hey, here we've got a 2-lane highway. So our
Right.
opportunity for accuracy is going to be much greater with a ring than it is with a wrist wearable. But it all depends on how you use the data. If you want
Yeah.
accuracy, you've got to move this direction. If this is more of a if your choice here is more, say, driven by I want it because it looks cool. Okay,
Yeah.
well then the
Yeah.
wrist is a fine place to wear it, right? That's fantastic. Go for it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that ends up being a lot of buying decisions around this. Is like
Yeah.
people think it's cool if you wear that, so I'm going I'm going to
Hmm.
go out and buy that. And we
Yeah.
see that ironically, and we both know this having a career in professional sports. When I think about it today, whoever's listening to this podcast is no different than a professional athlete because the
Absolutely.
pro athletes internally, what are they doing? They're coming outside of their organizations to seek what wearable do I use? How do I get that advantage? Right? So they're coming out with the same knowledge that
Yeah.
consumers have. It's the only difference is they have resources and
Yeah.
they have people like yourself that can help navigate that pathway with a wearable. But we're seeing that more and more, that athletes direct are coming outside of their organizations to make that
Yeah.
selection. But yeah, it's a it's a it's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah.
The risk
The
is a
only way
tough
that I've
place.
been able to get accurate heart rate during exercise is to pair this with a heart rate strap. A
Yes.
chest strap, just like
Yeah.
you were talking about, like
Yeah.
Polo was one. I use a Morpheus strap.
Yep.
Garmin do straps, but actually using the electrical conduction of the heart versus, as you said, that sonar trying to
Mm.
read it through the blood vessels of the wrist with all the bony structures that are
Yeah.
there, and
Oh,
it's chaos.
it is
And so I
absolute
think that's
chaos.
the
Yeah.
only way I've been able to do it. But it's
Yeah.
quite cumbersome.
It is. Yeah. It really is. And the risk. I don't know. Somebody's got to get better at PPG, or we've got to have
Yeah.
some better. I don't think it's even a higher quality signal, because I think the signal quality is about as good as it's going to get. It's
Yeah.
why are we collecting at the wrist? Because it's easy to strap it on. Is it easy to put the ring
Exactly.
on? Is it
Yeah.
more difficult to put on a strap? Yeah, I don't want to wear a heart rate strap all day. There's tech coming out.
Correct.
There's like even patches that you can put on and peel off and throw
Hmm.
away after 8 days
Hmm.
that will measure things like heart rate. So I think we're going to see more accurate and what I'll call
Yeah.
with less friction for the user, because that's one of the other conditions. Because when you think
Hmm.
about it, like we've talked about, we want to collect data over time and we want to have
Hmm.
this temporal view of data. Well, if it's too hard to charge the device, or it's cumbersome for
Right.
you to wear it, or it's uncomfortable, or it's invasive to your activity, like you wouldn't want to
Right.
wear a ring in the NBA, you couldn't, right? It's
Right.
against the rules. So it's all those questions that need to be asked before we select even what wearable we're going to pick.
Yeah. Well, and I even find the accuracy of the data. This is super convenient. It's always on me.
Yeah,
I never forget this. But if I go on a hike and it tells me my max heart rate was 52
you're like,
and I
yeah,
burned
no.
50 calories, I'm so mad. Right?
Yeah. And
I feel
look,
cheated.
you're giving us an entry point to almost a psychographic that comes with wearables. Now,
Right.
here's some data, just off the cuff, tangential data. 44% of the US population are currently wearing something to monitor health.
Wow.
44%. So
Wow.
there is a shift towards performance, but I
Yeah.
think there's more of a shift towards, hey, this medical system is failing me somewhat. So
Right.
therefore, I now need
Right.
to take accountability for my own health and for my own fitness and wellness. I think we're
Yeah.
seeing those things as well. But yeah, there's so much of a challenge with looking at the data and knowing what to do with it, because even the highest valued wearable company on the planet, subscribers only last about 6.5 months on their
Yeah.
system. And
Yeah.
so that tells me that after about 6 months of use, I'm not getting
Yeah.
this, or it's saying to me like 3 out of 4 days, the data looks good, but that fourth day, like I'm mad because it told me
Yeah.
that, I only burned 50 calories, or I'm mad because of
Right.
this. Yeah, we see
Well,
that all the
yeah,
time.
I found that a lot with, I'd have a great night's sleep. It would give me a super high score for my sleep,
Yeah.
which would give me a super high target for my workout.
Yes.
But then if I would go and do an upper body day, if I go and lift weights,
No data.
it would be a killer workout, but I'd
Yeah.
only get like 6 points. But if I walk the dog
Yeah.
after dinner, I get like 200 points.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So they can be quite cardio leaning as well.
They are very
I think
cardio
you've
leaning.
got to be really, again, back to our goal.
Mm.
If I'm let's say I went for my DEXA scan
Yes.
and I want to add lean mass,
Yeah.
like these aren't the device you want to be wearing,
Not at all.
because this isn't going to tell you how hard your lift was, how much volume you had. So
Exactly.
I think it can be quite challenging to align a wearable with the specific goal you have.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that I was looking for in professional sport, and we've both had low and no injury seasons in sport, which is so rare. And it's how we connected, I think, intellectually in
Yeah.
the onset. I was just coming off an injury-free season in Taiwan. No, that was 2019. I built up. I probably used some of your knowledge to extract that over there. But I remember at the time, just trying to get data, because one of the things I thought of, like in my communication with athletes specifically, I'm always looking, like I use the term edge a lot. Like this is going to be a hard edge day. This is going to be a soft edge day
Right.
based upon what I think we're being presented with, or based upon historical knowledge of, say, games played the days before, etc. I'm always looking for that edge because we want the workout, because the coach is going to tell you we have to work out, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
everyone's on the line in pro sport.
Because it's sport.
Because it's sport, right? And sport and military, how they overlapped and became the same thing, I'll never know, because that kind of is what it feels like, right? You enlist
Yeah.
in a sport. But
Yeah.
with that entire process of getting to zero injury, I wanted as much data as I could, because I want to make objective decisions, not guess, every time I can. But I was fortunately smart enough to know in our zero injury season that the data informs, it doesn't decide. I think that's the second time I've said that on this podcast. And I was the one tasked with making that decision, and I wanted that responsibility for our team and our athletes. And the data is beautiful when it's lining up for you well, and when there's some accuracy there, or there's at least repeatability, of the information. We end up leaning into, even in baseball games, there's a system in professional baseball called TrackMan, and one of the things we leaned into was understanding, it would give us, okay, the maximum point of horizontal arm position, maximum point of vertical arm position, and then release point, and we would millisecond timestamp those and create arm acceleration mechanisms and look at velocity on the baseball and say, hey, his arm's now working faster to produce the same speed. Time out. There's compensation happening. Right? I am always looking in game. I'm looking for, did an athlete shift into compensation? In training, I was always looking for, was he well recovered, and could I push them a little bit harder the next day?
Yeah.
What it all comes down to in pro sport, and even consumers have heard this, your listeners have probably heard about this term, load management, right?
Yeah, we did a whole episode with Tim Gabbett on load management.
Good old Tim. Yeah, I love Tim. Tim's he's a good man, and he is like, I kind of elbowed him, and because we're of similar ages, I said to Tim, hey, chronic
early 20s.
Yeah, early 20s. Yeah, just 22, 23. Yeah. About 3 times that, mate. But anyway, Tim, I would say, I joke with him and say, mate, you've come up with this beautiful terminology, chronic and acute load management. But then we used to call that volume and intensity back in the day, mate. How hard are we?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are we rebranding?
We're rebranding, but Tim's done a phenomenal job. I mean, he's the information hub for load management. Yeah. But what is load, and how do you measure it? One, it's not linear. It is not this quantified. Load should be qualified, not quantified, right? We get to the point with
what
load.
Do you mean by that, Gary?
Okay, so the NBA, where you came, where you spent some time with Brooklyn in the NBA, the way the NBA league office measures load right now is minutes played. Okay, so 1 minute versus 1 minute. You are Dirk Nowitzki with the Mavericks, and you're a center, and you're standing back at the kind of at the half court line while Vince Carter and all these guys are muscling up under the rim, elbow people left and right. You're still watching this go on. There's a minute's worth of struggle down here. A minute is equal to a minute. Sorry, guys, it's not. It's like pitch count in baseball. Every individual pitch has a different strain that goes on. So a pitch is not a pitch. A minute is not a minute. When we're talking about load on the body, the reason we want to measure that is we're looking for this holy grail of adaptation. We want to get better. That's what we're trying to design here. But load management, for some reason, in the US, in pro sports, we've looked at load like it's a bank account. Don't spend this, cut back. Don't spend too much the next day. And actually, through the metrics and through the data, we're de-evolving athletes because we don't have the right view of them. So when we look at the injury rates in US sport versus the rest of the world, we are off the charts horrible at managing injuries in professional sport because of this factor. I think load, not looking at it from we've got to look at it from a non-linear perspective, and not quantitatively but qualitatively, and understand it from a heat map kind of matrix.
And I think that goes into this general population work as these wearables went out. Because same as you, when I was at the Maple Leafs and
Mm,
we had a 3.5 year run with no injuries,
I know, it's brilliant.
and
Yeah, yeah.
it was multi-layered data. We talked about sleep data, and for this monitor, and we talked about, okay, heart rate data, these monitors, but then where do we get our mechanical load, our
Mm,
weightlifting? How do we monitor that? We were lucky in that we could get constellations of data because
mm,
we could have all of the monitors we needed,
right.
and we could work them into the day with the athlete.
Hmm.
I think that allowed us to make smarter decisions.
No
And I
doubt.
think that's how people have got to be looking at their wearable selection. It is there isn't one that's going to do it all.
No, there's
And
not.
I think that we have to be careful here because there's only so many things you can put on your body
Yeah, and we're
and that people
talking,
will do.
yeah, and we're talking about measures and assessments, and there's something we've got to kind of differentiate here too. Getting measurements one thing, monitoring how your body is performing is
Yeah.
generally termed something else. But I tend to look at assessment as very non-linear as well. Why are we doing all these lab tests with our athletes in a lab which do not translate to the field when we could be,
Yeah.
let's have an assessment of how did he run that out route in the NFL, to make that catch. Did he pivot? What did that look like? All those things. That
Mhm.
alone in that micro moment is an assessment. So when
Yes.
we're capturing data and we're kind of scoring it and putting it on the board, I think there's so many ways we can look at it, but it comes back down to the what we're looking for within all this data, mate. And we've talked about this a lot, cause and effect, right? And that's the
Right.
challenge with the human body is there are things that correlate. There are those
Yeah.
interrelationships between physical systems like your nervous
Yeah.
system, your cardiovascular system, your hormonal system. There's all these systems that have nice data that we can measure and correlate, but
Yeah.
there's interrelationships, but there's also interdependencies, right?
Right.
The
Right.
physiological system, your heart rate's ability to pump blood out of that left ventricle could be the rate limiting factor for your
Hmm.
expression on the field or on the court or
Yeah.
training for that 5K. We know the importance of this engine to pump blood,
Yeah.
to get it to the cellular level where we need it. But this is just one measure. And it is a critical measure, and I think there's no one on the planet that would disregard cardiovascular measurement at
Yeah.
any point in time. But it's how we want to use it, and even cardiovascular
Hmm.
measurement. Like I talked to a guy today between our conversations at the gym. So I work out at
Right.
this Planet Fitness, right? Go in, and there's this older gentleman, probably in his mid 80s, joining the gym, and Planet Fitness is a very low staffed. They don't have staff
Yeah.
around. They don't have trainers
Yeah.
around, right? And it's like $10 a month. That's why I go there. It's great. I know what I'm doing, right? Go there.
Amazing.
And so this guy, I was getting ready to check in, and he's asking this poor girl behind the counter who's a teenager, my lower back's bad. This is bad. So what do? I'm like, hey, I want to introduce myself. I'm a member here. I'm glad that you
Yeah.
joined. I said, would you like me to show you a couple of exercises? He's got a bad low back. You want me to show you a
Yeah.
couple of things? And he's like, when are you coming next? And so it's like, yeah, I don't
You
work
got a new
here.
training
And so,
partner.
yeah, exactly. I might have an 85-year-old training partner. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, but these are the things, like he's got a back issue, and that is the biggest thing. It's the build. He
Yeah.
goes, I can't chase my grandkids like I used to. Okay, if I was working with him,
Right.
that's my goal, is to
Right.
have him mobilize.
Right.
And there's not, well, cardiovascular fitness is important there, but what's probably more important for him is flexibility, right? And I
Yeah.
think as we get more, as we get smarter around the human body, like
Mhm.
we see fads come in all the time,
Yeah.
right? We see fads and trends all the time. One that's coming in now big time, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. We can have an offline discussion on this one. Breath work is the next big
Yeah.
thing that is hitting us really
Yeah.
hard right now. Two experts I know in that space. I was on a call with one of them this morning because of your breath's ability. And I love the term. This is Vanessa Secon. Her name is. You can look her up on social media. She's the head of performance for HSBC, the CEOs and the executives in the
Interesting.
financial sector. But
Right.
she came out of sport. She was a prominent field hockey player with the University of Michigan. She's a brilliant woman. we talk a lot about breath work and how that's coming on, and how she used a brilliant term. She says, it's like the vineyard for your soul is breathing. And I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
love that. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that is just gorgeous, because
Yeah.
when exhalation, what we want to get is our nervous system calm and
Yeah.
balanced and stable. I think that's the next frontier, that we'll find some wearables, and
Yeah.
it'll be easy to do. We just need a shirt with what's called a tensionometer in it, and we
Yeah.
could look at respiration, but
Yeah.
O2 expression, CO2 output,
Yeah.
O2 inhalation are all critical markers, and the only way we can get that is through gas analysis and
Yeah.
things like that. But these become really interesting data sets when you can get them
Yeah.
to achieve a specific goal. Sorry, that was
They
kind
do,
of
and
everywhere.
no,
All
but I
over the
think
place.
that biofeedback loop, I think that's another important part of wearables.
Yeah,
And I think it all comes back to, we want to know how is this helping me?
yeah,
Is this
exactly.
data helping me?
Yeah,
And I think the biofeedback loop between, and this is where one of those companies does a great job. What did I do over the last 24 hours?
mm-hmm.
What did my data tell me?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to change going forward?
Right.
And I think aligning that with our goals and how we know it's helping us, are we getting objectively closer to our goals?
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think having things like the vests, like I've worked with some of those at the Nets, where we
Mm.
would have do breath work while guys were shooting free
Yeah,
throws.
excellent. Yeah,
And so having that feedback loop, that longitudinal monitoring, and something you said that was really important, like your ability to pump blood out of your heart might be your limiting factor. And so that's where you've got to understand that your data is your data. It's
exactly.
not my data. We
No.
can't
Yeah.
compare me and you. Like
Heart
Gary
rate,
and Jeremy are not the same.
our resting heart rates are going to be totally different. I guarantee
Right.
that. Right. I was.
And so
Yeah.
I track mine over time and I
Mm-hmm.
look for change in mine. I don't say, well, Gary's is 50 and mine's 80.
Right.
That's no good.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
So
No.
we got to track our own data over time. And is it improving in the direction that we want it to go to achieve our goals? Your
Exactly.
85-year-old guy, right? His marker is, can I pick my grandkid up?
Yep. Exactly.
If he can't, he's not moving in the right direction.
No. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
same thing with our, we've got 82-year-old women, we've got 70-year-old men. The thing I always ask, I generally get people when we're solving a problem for them. And I'll say, well, when does this cause you the most pain?
I love that
And I say, you
question.
know what? When
Yeah.
I drive to LA, when I drive to LA, this hamstring just lights up. It's killing me. I say, okay, there's our marker.
Yep.
You, one day very soon, you are going to do a drive down to LA and back.
Pain free.
And I'm going to ask you how it was. And you're going to say, you know what? I didn't think about it. And that's when we'll know we're going in the right direction. So I think you got to pick something like that.
You got to chase the currency that you want. And the currency I want is happiness within quality of life for the individual.
Yeah.
That's all I'm looking for, right? And so earlier we talked a lot about, the data and, it's the rise of a psychographic known as the quantified self, right? There's enough people out there that really want to understand, what do my metrics look like? And this was the interesting thing that we have just talked about. When I would show an athlete data, and this, the very first question is, well, how does that compare to everybody else? That's the competitive nature of that athlete.
Yeah.
And I would always be like, well, I'm not comparing you to everybody else. The best golfers on the tour are internally focused, not externally focused, right? Yeah. So to shift that focus back internally, where we have control and accountability to our decision-making processes for our own health, is where we want this to go. And I think to that point, everyone defines from the quantified self psychographic position, everybody has a different design on happiness, right? And what makes them happy. Yeah. And if the numbers are important to you, then fine, we can pump numbers at you all day, if that's what you want. But if you're looking to lean on that data to make qualified decisions about how you're going to train the next day, or trying to correlate that to how you're feeling, you've got to own it yourself. And to this point today, I'll take how you feel over a data point because of the inaccuracy of the wearable so far.
Yeah, we had a lot of young sports scientists with the teams that I worked with, and they were always trying to gather data on the readiness of the athlete. Have they recovered?
Yeah.
And my question to them, well, have you asked them? Like, ask the athlete; they'll probably tell you.
Yeah.
No, I'm sore as hell. Oh, okay, good.
Look, I can sign off on this quote for 300,000 for this technology to monitor their readiness. Why don't you just go and ask them? You got 15 of them on
Just
the NBA court, right? Just go and
just
ask
sit
them.
down and have a cup of tea with them,
Yeah,
and
that's
they'll
one.
tell you.
Yeah, with the so I'm head of performance. I was for many years. I just came out of this role 12 months ago, head of performance for the Australian national baseball team. And so one of
Right.
the things we did was lean in. I leaned into a software company out of New York called Coach Me Plus. They developed an app for me where I'd have the athletes check in every day when we're in tournament play. They would have, tell me how you're feeling today, 1 through 5.
Uh,
But then I'd have them also indicate pain levels on a body map. You know, if something was
yeah,
sore, you know, where it was sore, and that was more of the objective stuff we were getting. But it was exactly that, mate. We were on the bus going to play Japan or going to play Korea, and we would be on the bus, and I would be with my medical staff going, okay, guys, as soon as we get to the ballpark, this left-handed pitcher has got some lat pain and soreness. We need to
yeah,
address that right away. And I'd put a hierarchy together based upon the data. So my medical team and my performance team could go straight to work and we were covered. And it was that kind of a model that catapulted us, pun intended, from 14th in the world to 6th, to rank
right.
6th in the world. It was that ability to optimize. And that is
Yeah,
the holy grail of sport, right? I would try to correlate
right.
what I saw from in-game performance to what I was getting. And those things were very hard to correlate against as well. So we were doing as good a job as we had just through communication and just
Hmm.
through and the consistent tap in and check in. And we could see,
Yeah,
I could see where players would peak. And our pitching staff specifically, when I was looking at the starters and I was looking at their recoverability, you know, for what we could get, we issued aura rings to them as well
yeah.
during that process. But the data that we could get, yeah, it was critical for us understanding readiness. But it's the same for a consumer. Like I want to wake up this
Hmm.
morning. If I am looking at my data, I'll look in the mirror first and go, how's this guy? How you doing inside, right?
Yes,
How's that
yes,
look? And
yeah,
then I'll look at the data and say, oh, geez, I'm feeling pretty good today, or geez, I'm tired. That's what turns me towards the data, right?
yes,
It's how I feel first that has me look. I don't look at my data every day. You
yeah,
know, just I trust how I feel, and I'm a little bit of a skeptic on the quality of the data right now, but
yeah.
it'll get better. And data will get better over time.
Yeah, and that's certainly been the case. And I think, Gary, that's such a good place for us to start wrapping up here. We're
Sure.
coming up on the hour, and
Oh wow.
what I'd love to hear from you, if somebody wants to start their journey of using objective data to improve their health, what are 3 things that they can do to start that process?
The very first thing I would ask, and this has been part of my kind of working philosophy for a very long time. I think it was 2000 and no, actually, oh, going back now, this is 1995. Okay,
Oh,
I'm going back to 1995. There was a biomechanist by the name of Tom Purvis from
right.
Oklahoma City. Got to know Tom really well. We did a lot of work with him at Cybex. He would start with the question was always, "What's your goal? What is your
Hmm.
goal?" And that stuck with me. And I think to this day, if a consumer's going in, like if you go into Best Buy today, you go up, health wearables are the number three right now, revenue stream out of Best Buy. Big screen
Wow.
TV, washer and dryer, health wearable. So that
Wow.
section, if you walk into Best Buy, is growing exponentially right now.
Hmm.
Aura's got a display, Whoop's got a display, there's Garmin has a display. All these things are displayed out. The problem is for the consumer when they walk in there, what do they choose? Yeah,
Right.
and why? Right. So the very first thing is to have very pure goal in mind. That is the very first step.
Hmm.
So I even if it's like I want to look good for this wedding that I'm going to in 6 weeks' time, is that enough time to lose a little bit of body fat, to get my
Right.
posture in great shape? What are the things that I need to identify aesthetically that are going to be
Hmm.
part of my goal to move forward? And then what are the
Right.
physical systems that I want to monitor to enhance that goal, to make that
Right.
6 weeks as optimized as it can possibly be? So setting a goal is definitely the very first step.
Right. And number two?
Number two would be to understand, once you've got your goal in mind, say it is run a 5K, to find an expert in the field, find a personal trainer with the good certifications, the CES, the PES, the CSCS, those who have gone down an educational pathway, who might be able to guide some of this information relative to selection of device. But I think, once you've got your goal in mind, it's contact a professional, figure
Yeah.
out what you want to do. And many of them will do this. Like, I do this for free with 85-year-old guys at the gym, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, because we want to help. That's our nature, right? We want to drive this
Yeah.
in. And it doesn't mean everybody who's listening call Jeremy. Here's his personal number. I'll give it to you now. No.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, how do we want a professional to kind of give us their overall assessment. Hey, Gary, you want to run a 5K? Your
Yeah.
knees aren't that good right now for a 5K. So we're
Right.
going to, because of pre-existing injuries and things in your body consistently, we're going to make training recommendations using the data around the things that are towards your goal, but we want to identify you as an individual and look at those potential injuries but not as rate limiters, because they may not be rate limiters because we compensate
Yeah.
so well, we walk so well, we move well.
Yeah.
But that'd be the thing. Contact the professional who can get you the
Yeah.
assessment, right? And I say those one and two go, once you've got the goal and you've got the professional recommendation, what system are you going to measure is the decision
Yeah.
from that. And that is either going to be, I'm going to measure my musculoskeletal system in terms of how it moves in 2 dimensions, and so therefore GPS is a great choice. I'm going to look at recovery as well, so maybe this one device I put on my wrist will give me a little bit of distance data. It'll give me some recovery data, but I got to understand at the wrist again, it's a little bit
Yeah.
inaccurate, but I'm going to
Yeah.
pick a device that can give me the closest alignment to the physical systems I want to measure to achieve that goal. And quite often, if you go into that Best Buy display and look at everything that's in there now, there's no guidance, there's no recommendations.
Yeah. No.
We
No.
need consumers need
Yeah.
help in this space, and I would say those are the three. Have a goal in mind, consult a professional, log in, do your homework, do your research on those individuals, and then understand what device to pick based upon your goal and potentially the rate limiting factors of your own body, whether that's pre-existing injury or whether that's something that says it could be the way that you just approach technology. I don't like wearing a ring. I don't like
Yeah.
wearing something
Yeah.
here. I don't really want. I feel like, oh, my data's not private now. It's going out into the
Yeah.
universe, and everybody knows Jeremy's heart rate at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's those factors. I'd say, to me, that's how I'd approach it. But it's, again, lean into the error on the devices, and really good
Yeah.
companies, the ones that are trying to get better, know their own limitations and are trying to improve
Right.
all the time.
Right. Gary, that's amazing for you, and we certainly hope that this podcast has helped people be more informed and learn a bit more about this. Where can people learn more from you, mate? How can they get in touch?
Yeah, my email address, I'll give it to everybody direct. It's gary@mccoyperformance.com, and we can throw this up on
Right.
the information around the podcast. If anyone's
Yeah,
got
we'll
a
put it on the
question,
show notes.
if anyone's got a question, feel free to reach out. I'm purely consulting right now, doing some work. And look,
Nice.
if you've got a quick question, I don't think I have the time to take on another client, but if there is a quick question that comes
Yeah.
up, hey, I'm comparing Whoop to Aura, or I'm comparing this to that, and my goal is this, I'd be
Yeah.
happy to provide some recommendations around that.
Well, that's super generous of you, Gary, and the audience will certainly appreciate that. And that's who you've been for me over the years, in our professional capacity,
Yeah,
outside of just being a dear friend. I've always been able to lean on you to help me make those decisions with my teams, all the way from the Nets through the Leafs. You brought us Catapult into the Leafs.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
then we went on to NYCFC. I was always calling you. I think I called you about Zone 7.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so throughout my career, you've been an incredible resource for me, and I feel so fortunate to have been able to share our connection with our audience here. So
Same.
thanks so much for coming on.
It's a mutual admiration society here because I learned so much from you as well, and I think your exploits as a practitioner. I like to look around. No one has done what you've done in the sport of hockey, or in the NBA, or even in in soccer. No one's done what you've done, and I think we're at the precipice of learning so much, and I think artificial intelligence is on the horizon. I'm continuing to work with manufacturers to make their data more and more accurate. I think once we get more accurate data, we understand the individual interrelated relationships between physical systems. We can then turn around and start to give some guidance on how to train today. I'd love to wake up, look at my phone and go, today I'm a 5K at this tempo, at this pace, and that is going to put me on target to achieve this time in the 5K that I'm going to run. That's where we want this to go. Artificial intelligence is waiting. Wearables have got to catch up.
Beautiful. Gary, we'll leave it at that. Mate, thanks so much for the time and coming on. We really appreciate you.
Love it, mate. And congratulations on the Vitality Collective. I think you're at the start of something really big.
Thanks, brother. That was a great conversation with Gary McCoy on wearable technology and performance data. Here are the 3 key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, define your goal first. The best wearable is the one that supports your specific, measurable health or performance goal. Number 2, use data to guide, not govern. Wearables are tools, not truth tellers. How you feel is still your best health compass. Number 3, track trends, not moments. Reliable insights come from consistent monitoring over time, not one-off numbers. If today's discussion resonated with you and you're looking for ways to integrate early detection, personalized health strategies, and strength-based longevity into your own life, we'd love to help. At Vitality Collective, we've built these principles into a comprehensive system designed to optimize your health and performance at any stage of life. If you're ready to take action and see how this approach could work for you, visit www.vitality-collective.com to learn more. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.